podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. You are listening to Good Brothers. As always, please take the best part for yourself. Peace. Peace. I'm Justice.
Justice Rajee, what's happening, my brother?
Man, look, let me tell you, it is the 7th day of Black History Month, and we figured that it would be maybe plenty of time to take a look and talk about Black History Month. What it looked like, right now. And as I always like to remind people, just to set the foreground for this conversation, is that Black History Month arose from Black people doing something for themselves, for their own benefit. And I know people make jokes in the comedy, and there'll probably be some jokes in this conversation. But I just like to reaffirm that the origin of Black History Month did not start with some benevolent, person of European descent.
It ain't start with white people being nice, right? I think it's important to start that and state that when it comes to a whole host of things with our people, frankly, right now. So I'm 1,000% with you.
Yeah, I mean, because that's always the subtext, I feel, of this with Black people. Like, why would I do Black History every year? You know what I mean? They're like, yeah, I got it, dog. I understand you extra double. You read about Sojourner Truth every month, not just in February. But the reality of, like, because other people, and we'll get to this, I think, maybe. So let me hold that and just go. What's something just at this moment, just coming into Black History, like what's some of your initial thoughts about this, just in the context of what we've been going through, since this time more or less last year, and what's happening and all the things and pandemic, the tumult, as it were, you know what I'm saying, in the wake of the occurrence and the murders and the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery.
I mean, so one thing I want to touch on with that, again, this is might be a little bit touchy, might be a touchy podcast for some folks.
Hey.
But I think, I think the world, obviously, when looking at the murder of George Floyd, was justifiably, everyone over the world was justifiably angry at what they saw. And we saw the buildup of, you could argue 400 years, you could argue 50 years, just depending on whatever your twist is, right? 400 years, 50 years, 10 years of whatever, of around Black folks and dying specifically on camera, right? Which I think is a very unique part of this conversation that I'll touch on when it comes to Black History Month. That, like, Black people have been dying, but Black people started dying on camera around 30 years ago. Or getting beaten up on camera about 30 years ago, dying on camera maybe 10 years ago, right? So 6 to 10 years ago. So I think there's a different kind of conversation that emerges when that happens, very much like the Civil Rights Movement and how, when it was broadcasted around the world, the United States was not in a position of strength to go and tell other people what to do, right? So with that, this Black History Month, it's only 7 days in, so I'll, be gracious. It just feels like month 9 or month 8 of white people being scared about Black people. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel like it's like, oh, Black History Month. It feels like we better talk about Black history or give somebody Black some money because it's Black History Month, and they're going to talk about we ain't good enough and we ain't woke enough. Right? It doesn't feel, I mean, and I know we'll touch deeper on it a little later, but it doesn't feel like that kind of self-developed, self-oriented vision that then others connect to. It feels like very, how do we check the boxes and make sure that we acknowledge Black people? And I think Black folks are trying to think about, how do you have Black History Month during a time where it's like there's this broader call for change and shift, right? And what does it mean to kind of celebrate the past? And then when kind of, what's the past in a time where past is prologue now, like, what does it mean to celebrate who doing what, meaning what, in a time before where I think, again, because it was more self-developed and coming again from a time, that we had to assert and affirm our own history, because it, by and large, was not only ignored, but actually actively hidden and actively blocked, which I think are just differences, right? So,
right. Yeah. I spent some time actually thinking about, because we were like, oh, we should do something, like some of our parent organizing and family organizing here. Like, we should do something for Black History Month, and it's like, and then like the kids want to do something, like some schools, like we need to some kind of like, like, right, we need to do some sort of signifying activity, right? And it's it's interesting, like, it's like you end up looking at Black History Month like from a third perspective, like it's happening, and it's like other people, oh look, like like the commercial come on with the with the kente cloth and the deep voice, so much dignity and pride, you know what I'm saying, and then you see like, and it's like we like some like proud Black person crossing their arms after making something or handing something to somebody, or like moving their business forward, like whatever, like positive image, some, entity or corporate vehicle, will bring forward, or like, maybe a declaration about something, like, and it'll be like I guess it's cool, right? Like, I mean, but then I'm like, like, I don't really ask y'all to do none of that. Like, I don't know if none of that helps me personally, right, with understanding and history and context and learning, and definitely Justice, as person with a degree in history, is definitely like, y'all don't really enjoy studying history, because studying history ain't always celebratory, right? Sometimes it's just learning the details, and you can find, I find joy in the understanding of the whatever happened, right, of the events or the subject matter, and seeing the answer, but it may not be this like triumphant moment, right? And there was a piece I came across, and I was, I didn't read it all the way. I was actually reading it last night before I had to handle some other things. And the New York Times, and the sister sort of was writing about, I'll post that in the notes, kind of like the weight of the way we talk about, Black historical figures. And is it fair to like kind of put all this sort of like triumphant narrative of change and this and that on them? And even in the way we as I saw, at least where it was at, and it's sort of the way we consume the past, you know what I'm saying? And and I will say that for we tend to look for heroes, right? And so like we were, even in our deliberations, or like what would be a good signifying event, we kind of got into this conversation about like, I don't want to do something and push people to like go watch something sad or engage in something, like, oh, this is history, but it's no fun here. You know what I'm saying? In the name of sort of like, deeper understanding of Black people or Black moments. And at the same time, I don't think it's healthy to like avoid studying things. But like, just as an example, like I remember maybe in the middle of January, especially when I started rechecking email, seeing an email like somebody like, oh, we're putting together some stuff for Black History Month, and it was like, oh yeah, we need some topics, and it was like the first three things, and I might have mentioned this in another conversation, were like racism, gentrification. I was like, yo, I don't want to. Why am I going to take extra time to study that? Right. Like I study that all the time. Like I have a 24-hour day daily job studying the ramifications of, you know what I'm saying, the activation of racist public policy as it pertains to the life outcomes of the families and young people that I serve, the family young people I'm a part of. Like, I'm steeped in that. I don't need to spend like an extra week in Black History, but go to a lecture about that, right? You know what I'm saying? And it just got me thinking about it, like, well, what you know, what would be more meaningful? And I worry that sort of our own conversation about us becomes this like ongoing, you know, policy debrief of like Black pain and suffering and shit, and then someone telling us how dignified and all these different fantastic morals and virtues we've showed in the light of the never stating in the light of the heinous violence of those around us, but just sort of like going like, oh man, everything, you know. I think, you know, some people thought about with Henry Aaron, you know, passing last month, like mentioning him and talking about how upstanding and dignified he was, while not saying how brutal people treated him, particularly white people. Like you're not actually like you're kind of. You're making this great thing about him and who he was, while acting like the context that made him have to be that way, is not to be mentioned.
Well, I think that's the challenge with the dichotomous relationship of kind of like system hero, system villain dialogue.
Yeah.
Right. And again, I think there's a conversation in our communities where at one point it was like, okay, we're going to talk about, you know, El Hashim Shabazz, Marcus Garvey, Lewis Latimer, the fact that George Washington Carver made everything out of everything, right? Like, but that was a level of, again, going back to the systems, to your point though, reinforcing our humanity in a system that does not affirm our humanity. Now we're in month 8 of a constant conversation about the system not reinforcing our humanity. So to your point, now it feels like, okay, so we're going to talk again about the thing that we just talked about? Or we're going to talk about the fact that, like, you know what I mean? Like, are you going to talk about the fact that, like, you know, health disparities killed Black folks a long time ago and experiments did, which is why Black folks don't want to take the, you know, the vaccine now? Like, is that what you want to talk about for Black history, right? Or to your point, do you want to talk about this Black person who persevered with all the struggles against them as a hero to be seen, lifting them up and talking nothing about the context in which they come from, right? One of my challenges is we look at Black history about people versus places, or people versus ideas, or people versus even communities. I saw something about like Black Caribbeans in the Harlem Renaissance, right? And I thought that was interesting because then it takes it out of just this one person and says, hey, here was a community of people who connected to this Harlem Renaissance in a unique way, which is good for us to think about. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's good for us to think about. But if you just make it about individual people, you're either, like I said, a hero or here's the problem. You create this dichotomy, which again, in 1987 or 1985, when El DeBarge and them are singing "Celebrate for King, Celebrate," like, you know what I mean? Like, that's fine. We were trying to tell our kids to make sure that they didn't mess up the perspective of Martin Luther King, right? But now it feels different. And going back to your point, how much of it is motivated by the interest of engaging and telling the world about Black people, not just Black people, right? That's another challenge I think we have in this time, where I would argue, even though we know Black history is world history, I shouldn't even have to say that, but, you know, for the sake of it, you know, a lot of Black History Month was about Black people knowing about who Black people were. Once again, it was for us. It was early FUBU, right? It was for us and by us.
Yeah. It was absolutely. It was definitely like, hey, like, you know, I know people, what you've experienced has painted a world, whereas if the only one you appeared out of the ether in chains somewhere in the lowlands of South Carolina. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
that's where you came from. You know what I mean? It's like no. Actually, there's a whole world that, you know, not only predates the current, you know, what the people you're descended from experience here, but there's actively another world happening.
Right.
And people that look like you are doing different things, you know,
and to say nothing. And to say nothing about the fact that there were actually black people who did things not in America that you should care about too, which is a whole nother conversation, right? That there actually were black people who went other places. There's actually a place where a whole bunch of black people is called Brazil, right? You know what I mean? To say nothing of actually Africa, like, you know what I mean? So, yeah, black people went to France and did stuff. And you know what, you should kind of know about it. But again, we can't have a conversation about the nigritude movement when we're having a conversation about, like, how dehumanizing is it to experience gentrification during the time of COVID. Right? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't think about that, but the context of thinking about the goal of Black History Month, not just its original goal, but then its practical goal up until relatively recently, and then how is it being used and how does it stand out in this time going forward for our community, and then also broadly in a broader sense for the world.
So yourself, like, so I remember, like, it comes every year, and as I've worked in schools and educational spaces and things, like, you know, in programmatic, you know, spaces, it comes up every year, like, okay, what are we going to do, or what are we going to make sure our families connect with, or, you know, whatever. But I also wonder at this moment, and I you know, I try to, you know, to the degree that I can use, you know, the Twitterverse or, you know, other, you know, pipelines to young people, whether that be my kids or, you know, folks young people that, you know, we work with just to get a, you know, temperature test on, like, what are y'all thinking, right? Like, what's showing up for them, you know. But then it got me thinking about, like, you know, I remember, you know, elementary school Black History Month being, you know, we would, you know, maybe the bulletin board would have, you know, all the Black heroes up on it, you know what I'm saying? And maybe you get, like, the, you know, now, you know, I had a couple years there where I had pretty dope, you know, Black teachers, which I was, you know, fortunate to have. So those ones didn't feel, I guess, inauthentic or, you know, not healthy, so to speak. But this sort of, like, I wonder, like, how the folks handle it these days, like, and how are, you know, I don't know if millennials is the right generational construct, but, like, how do they experience it? Like, are they excited? Are they like, Black History Month is that bullshit when they gonna try to act like they care about me? You know what I'm saying? Like, is that the energy they coming with, or is it? Yeah, I mean, because you know, when you read up on Carter G. Woodson and basically the Harlem Renaissance crew, you know, related to this. You know, like, the energy was, yo, let's put on educational stuff for our community, right? Yeah, I mean, and I think the thing that's interesting sometimes when you're trying to do something that is shedding light or teaching people about whatever, you know, the subject matter, it you know, like me saying to young people, hey man, I want to have, do y'all know about the you know what I'm saying, like, the what's the name, Marines in the War of 1812, like the British, like the black, you know what I'm saying, formed some enslaved, some freedmen who joined the British because the British was like, look, if you join us, will you be free after the war is over? You know what I'm saying? So they enlisted, and they, like, and then looking into them, you know, fighting in the Maryland Eastern Shore, and, you know what I mean, like, that might not, like, somebody, I can see where someone could frame that in this, like, yeah, but we still ended up in persecution, so I don't even want to learn about that. Right?
Absolutely.
And I wonder, though, for me as a person, as a historian, and other, like, no, wait, like, don't worry, we don't got to talk about the present right now. Do you know what happened with this? Do you understand, like, the decision making, like, what happened to some of them guys? Did they achieve freedom? Did they end up, you know what I mean? So, like, you know, you can have a family, somebody ended up in the Bahamas, you know what I'm saying, or Trinidad. You know what I mean, or London or Manchester or something, but in reality, they was like, dude, they could be your cousins, like, several cousins once removed, but I mean, like, there's a context there to me that's I would be curious about, but I could also see somebody be like, why somebody going to put on a talk about the War 1812? We are in the struggle for our lives, brother.
Right. And make them wear like a red hat and a red suit as they fighting, and you know what I'm saying, like that Crispus Attucks outfit they used to have people put on. So. Crispus Attucks. It took me a while to learn about the complexity of Crispus Attucks, right? Which I think gets to your point. It's really about a broader knowledge of self and an awareness of where you stand in history. I don't want to paint it with a broad brush, but I think one of the challenges is that younger people are embracing parts of our history and people within our history and events with our history that kind of the mainstreaming of the Black community maybe didn't touch on, right? Like, for example, we talked about Baldwin, but a lot of times we just was like, oh, it's James Baldwin. He's an amazing writer, right? Where this generation is like, he was LGBTQ, right? Like they're framing him, and one could argue in his fullness, right? Where we just put him in the Black Pantheon, right? Or, people may have talked about Fannie Lou Hamer, but it's like, people are now being like, yo, y'all left Fannie Lou Hamer out when y'all talked about all these men in the Black, you know what I mean? So I think like anything, people are kind of trying to look for that which wasn't talked about, which I think is good. The broader challenge is, did we even talk about the other people? Are we talking about it all enough, right? Yeah. Because I think there's a lot missing. I mean, I think, whatever framework that everyone had of Booker T. Washington versus Du Bois, we know generally just stinks. Like you just didn't know enough about either of them, right? You just don't know the power of either of them. Yeah. And so if you ever wanted to posit them versus each other, you just don't know enough. The idea of repatriation and the relationship of the Caribbean to Marcus Garvey, we just don't know enough. So we don't know enough about so much that then it makes the old history look one-dimensional, and there'll be people looking for the multi-dimensional recent history, right? Or the present. And so then we kind of lose a broader sense of self about like literally how do we get here? Not like boats and ships, right? But like literally in the sojourn in America, in the relationship of the sojourn in America to however many people, to the indigenous people, to, what some call Latinx people. I want to respect that there's a tension in that community.
Yeah, right? That's not a fully, everybody don't see it the same.
Yeah, everybody don't see it the same. In relationship to white folks, which I know sometimes give people the shakes, but there is some conversation about Black History Month in relationship to white folks, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so, because I think only with that would you really see us not as just like this siloed community, that you really see our true, frankly, Americanness. Right? Like I think Gangs of New York and the whole idea where tap dancing came from and the jig and like that whole idea of the interaction between the Black and the Irish dancing and what that created in coming to America. I mean, just as one example of so many, jazz, an example of our full Americanness. And I don't mean that in the sense of like some of this new stuff that's coming out, but I mean it in a sense of like, no, this is part of this country's history. But when we aren't telling the broader story in a way that lends itself for people to understanding, we're only telling it again in the struggle of, well, what you going to do for me since you didn't tell my whole story, right? And so we may or may not be doing as much in our own communities. And so one, obviously, COVID itself shifts an entire dialogue around engagement and relationship as far as like in-person stuff, right? Which I think has always been a really powerful element of discussing Black History Month, owing to its origin, like you said, about teaching our own people about our history. But then there's also just the kind of the new space we're at, which I think is good and it's challenging. And, one of the things that I was going to share, and I'll talk about a little bit here, is just this idea of impact versus scale. and making sure that we're balanced on the spectrum of impact versus scale.
I think that we don't got the delay to get into that. Let me just add just one thought. As you were saying, she was adding on about, I always think about, we have at this moment, we have a very public kind of thing of like, at least as I see it, of like what someone's analysis of what's happening with whatever, phenomena or thing that's happening in our society. And sometimes you can have a conversation where you're looking at the analysis in terms of like answers of like what to do, right? As opposed to as a set of like almost findings to look at and then see within those findings, like, okay, what is this study of this particular phenomena telling me about what's happening, right? I'm not making any decisions about it yet. I'm not saying whether I agree or disagree with it. I'm not taking it and then saying, oh, because of this, I need to do that now, right? Which is, typically the way we end up talking about things in the public square. So instead of, we understand within the context of a protest or something like that, where you may have, a concept that you push forward, such as the defund the police or Black Lives Matter or, whatever the people that tried to bum rush the Capitol and our traitors was trying to say. The traditionalists, right? Yeah, traditionalists. You know what I'm saying? When our indigenous, the water keepers, when they out there and when they're speaking to, the realities, the concepts of protecting the water, right? It's a big concept, right? Of saying we need to protect the water, in the very specific context of protecting it from this pipeline. But it's also part of a bigger idea about water protection and land and way land is used, way land's not used. And so for me, thinking about Black History Month as like a moment and the way we do our own ongoing sort of analysis body of Blackness, you know what I'm saying? Present, past, future, it impacts your perception, impacts your decision making. It impacts what you think is, right or wrong, so to speak, as it pertains to Black people. And I think it's sort of the place right now where we have some of these, these tensions sometimes that go unsaid and sometimes are quite stated, you know what I'm saying, even in the community around like, what are we doing, right? Because, we even like the context of the kind of the woke conversation as that played out and bubbled through the macro society was about this idea that there was a body of knowledge and an analysis that would make you woke, and then you should have a certain defined response. And then if you didn't have that defined response, you were not woke. And it's like, well, is that an accurate way to look at the data, right? Or whatever you've studied or however you've compiled the findings of what's going on in this situation. If you, and to me, the danger in not having some of these different details and understanding of stuff that might seem innocuous about the past or not relevant, right? Where somebody said, well, why do we need to know about that individual? I mean, what did they do? Right? You'll hit you with that. What did they do? And then you'll be like, well, I don't know what they did. Do you know anything about them? Right? Do you know where they're from? What part of the world they were in? There may be something within that points us to what we need to know, right? About that time or that place, right? So that's the power of, personal narratives. You know what I'm saying? If you had a relative that, happened to have a journal, from another age and you were able to access that journal, you can access an understanding of their time that you could never get by studying, I love Eric Foner's work, you know what I'm saying, as a historian, U.S. historian. You wouldn't be able to get that. Like that's what a real historian, they get into that stuff to then try to like cross-reference that with, okay, these people, we got these journals, they was writing this, these, you having a little reading group where y'all making little making notes every week and sharing them. You actually also are capturing thought of your age. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know if people think about knowledge and interacting with information in that way. So they may think it's not valuable if it's not very like, well, what's the action? What we about to do with it? Like, I don't know what we're going to do with it yet. But we should record these thoughts. We should know what's going on.
And just sometimes it's good, and this is a broader sense of Black history in the context of our sojourn in America, even though, I just said something. I said something different 15 minutes ago. Don't worry about that. But we do need to know, what were people experiencing and what were they seeing? Right? Like, were they seeing something in the 30s very similar to what you see now? And is that a systemic issue? Right? Is that systems? Is that a systems thing as far as like the actual systems, or that a systems thing as far as how people saw the world and see the world? And what does that mean? Right? What can you take from that? What can you take from the levels of success that already were achieved from an individual perspective that might not have been achieved from a collective perspective? And how can you connect that today, where you could have a situation where these companies are giving up money, like it's Brewster's Millions, right? And for everybody that, we'll provide a link for Brewster's Millions, right? Like, one of Richard Pryor's, I wouldn't say best, but damn sure funniest in his own way. But, what can we take from the fact that happened before? What can we take from the fact that there was a time you had a lot of doctors, or, my personal favorite / situation, which is Black Wall Street, right? Mm-hmm. Which is all these Black Wall Streets, and why can't we do it again? And then you ask the question, why can't you do it again living 30 miles from other Black people? Now, that's not a knock. It's just saying, let's be real about how Black Wall Streets and Black Main Street districts came together and how they did. They came together because you couldn't go nowhere else. You could not spend your money anywhere else, right? So therefore, let's just have a broader dialogue around what that means. And we've talked before about the whole how long money stays in the community, but just the reality of that is, listen, because they all had to live together in the neighborhoods. They were redlined, right? Mm-hmm. So it's easy. So we want to talk about the history of creating this thing again, but we also have to talk about, what are you willing to do to make that history real again? And do you want the other parameters of what Black Wall Streets were? Do you want the other elements of what it meant to have this, but can't do business other places, can only use 4 banks, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I think, to your point, the broader kind of breadth of the history informs, and the fact that there were no saints here with a lot of our history, right? Yeah. That, you take people like Du Bois, who in some ways did so much, but in some ways were so callous around other things with our community, right? Mm-hmm. You just take a lot of people where on one level they did such great things, another was like, oh man, that kind of stunk. But that's all of us are human. Some shit we do stinks, right? Like, so, and we shouldn't be trying to not present people that they shit stinks, so that we don't learn how to make ours maybe stink a little less, or maybe stink up the room a little less, right? So
finding an efficient system for getting the stinky,
getting the stink out, getting the smell out of the room, right? So I just think that that's really, really the important part of that, like the why, right? Like asking the why. But again, I think it's a shift in our communities where we're starting to ask the why, and it's not a bad thing that we're asking the why. I just think we have to engage it appropriately. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right. And that goes into my conversation around impact versus scale. Right. Because it's like, if you're largely being defined by a couple sets of neighborhoods all across the country, and then we've identified that it's important to share this information with each other so we see ourselves better in a space that does its best not to see us as human. Right. Then that's why we tell this hero story. Because we've had enough of not being human. We want to tell a hero story. We want our own heroes, like everybody's got their own heroes and never tells anything about them, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a context of us having that conversation, and then trying to maximize the benefits and maximize the power and the impact of sharing that information with a group of people who are not being told about themselves. Then obviously, as we get into different spaces, one of the things I always talk about is, for me, as a, adolescent and high school student, Black History Month meant, 50% off of McDonald's for the entire month. Let me tell you something. McDonald's was smart, man. They was like, it's your time. It's your heritage. Yeah, it's your heritage. It's your history.
So proud.
Right on. So proud. Know yourself, brother. And you know what I'm saying? Next thing you know, I mean, chicken sandwich and a filet fish sandwich, buy one, get one, had 50% off, buy one, get one free. Was killing McDonald's as a high school kid, man. Fries with all your filet of fishes and shit, man. Like, you know, it was like Burger King, they ain't do that. You know what I mean? But I mean, to be true, frankly, that was because McDonald's had, you know, they had folks not just working there, but they had franchisees, and they were ahead of understanding. You know, you better take advantages and get people in here and put this kente cloth on the in front. You know what I'm saying? When it's Black History Month, right?
Right. I was saying, I have the book. I started reading the book, but it's good. It's back in the backlog on the, you know what I'm saying, the impact of the Black franchisees and, you know, coming out of the 60s and 70s. You know what I mean? So I'm sure somewhere in there, you know what I'm saying, there's a piece of that is due to the influence of those individuals. You know what I mean? But I think it's like, I remember that too. And I forgot that they did have that discount. You know what I'm saying? Like, I never, it didn't, like now you say it, I'm like, oh yeah, that was always like February. Because it used to happen, because my birthday's in March. So in my mind, I remember like the discount would end like before my birthday. Because then, you know, your birthday, you try to angle for shit. So, you know what I mean? I'd be like, hey, Mom, the discount, man. We go give me some quarter pounders. What's up? You know what I'm saying? Like, but the discount was over. The discount was a February thing. But
man, you so mad. Let me tell you something. I was so mad February 27th, man. I was mad as a mother was February 27th, man. Because that meant them free fries and them chicken sandwiches. That was coming to an end, man. And my money ain't go nearly as far. You know what I mean? Like, I used to get all the black papers. You get the Tribune and all the different black papers in Philly, and just, hey, hold on, they got the McDonald's joints in there? Hold on, see. Right. My partner go one, yeah, he go like down north. I get the ones from down 52nd Street, 60th Street. We gonna get this, man. We gonna get McDonald's for everything they owe. That was reparations.
You know what I'm saying? They gonna pay us back. They gonna take care of us with these burgers and fries.
Yeah, right. If only I knew. But
yeah, right.
If only I knew. Yeah, right. The joke's on you, Jack. But but I was just saying, like, so you had this level of what you consider impact when you went to some sort of gym, right? You went to some sort of gym or rec center in the community. And somebody put an event on, and you know,
the celebration. It was sponsored by, you know, Budweiser or
that's right,
the Eagles or some shit. Like,
that's right.
I mean, like a sports team or
sports team, or just like somebody's brewery, somebody's like, you know, somebody selling beer, right? Because you know they wanted to shout you out as you came and bought a 6-pack. But then it was like the brothers and sisters would do something in, like I said, a gym or a rec center. And it's like, okay, we're going to hear from Brother Naeem Akbar, or, you know what I'm saying? We're going to hear from Amos Wilson, or we're going to hear from somebody about why history is so important. They're going to sell black books, right? So it was like a space and time where it was like for impact. And now, I would say as a broader conversation, we are now having a scale dialogue, right? So we're not having the, like, in the gym or rec center on the third Saturday, you know what I mean, with the Black Dance Ensemble and the ballet, you know what I mean, and somebody doing a poem from Langston Hughes, right? And half off chicken sandwiches. Right. Now we're talking about this broader sense of what does Black History Month mean in a time of global awareness about a racial reckoning, right? So it's almost like, what do you gain with scale and what do you lose with scale, right? And like, so that's the thing for me, that there's some of this stuff that for our children, it's just like, okay, yeah, this happened and this happened. Okay, cool. But like, no, but she should understand about Lewis Latimer. And it's like, okay, yeah, okay, I get that. But like, you know what I mean? So with the impact that we had, and then I guess my challenge, very similar to my relationship with Kwanzaa, in a sense of like, again, when you had people sitting in a church basement and celebrating these things, trying to assert our humanity and say that there were good things that came out of Africa, or African inspired sojourn in America, versus now I can go get a card at CVS or get a Kwanzaa gift, right? I can get you know what I'm saying? I can get one of the gifts that move around that had a canard moving around, right? And so, you know, I'm going to be an old curmudgeon, so I get it.
Yeah. But well, I think there's something there though, because and it's maybe a very me way to feel about it, but it does expose at scale. It exposes something like cognitively that's like this isn't enough,
right?
Like this is good. It isn't enough, but it is good, and then so then but like I mean, like I think when you get to a place with it and you go, you could. If we flooded the month and it was like, man, every day I got a different lecture to give to the young people, and we doing it every day for Black History Month, we're going in, and then I mean maybe that would be enough. I don't know, but you would some part of you goes like, yeah, even if we have like a whole lot of like really dope learning events and celebratory events, and maybe the young people do some connection, they do some hands-on stuff, whatever happens, whatever activities of learning and the expression or remembering and reminding of your legacy of competence and excellence, it won't be enough because these other things are still jacked up over here. They're like, they may be outside of your immediate cognitive bounds, but it's like, it's not enough. And so then you can be like, well, why even do it? Why don't we just talk about that we normally do it, and then let's just go on with whatever stuff we had to do. You know what I'm saying? Or, I wonder if sometimes, and then just generally the way almost like, when the macro society picks up something that was ours, that we start to lose interest in it. You know what I mean? We're just like, like...
Yeah.
They pick up the jazz. We kind of like, jazz, maybe on to this funk. You know what I'm saying? Like, they pick up the funk. We like, oh, maybe we on to this, you know what I'm saying? We on to this, electro jazz funk. You know what I'm saying?
No, you're on to something. I think you're really on to something there, because I do think about it on the sense of like how we are often the first adopters. And then in our community, there's something where like you did it, and then when other people that you didn't think were as cool as you started to find out about it, you didn't think it was cool no more. Even if it comes to something like that we all should have. Like, we have to argue, we all should know about our history. Everyone on the globe should know our history, right? It's part of our humanity. But it's almost like, okay, that's what y'all doing? Okay, I did that in the 90s. You know what I'm saying?
Y'all got that.
Y'all got that. I'm all, but it's like, okay, yeah, but there's still people who need to have that. So no, I do think there's something to be said there, as well as, again, when you have generations who have been more born into functioning in American society in a certain way, the expectation, I would say, Generation X's, we're kind of like in the middle of that, where it's like, we still remember deep disengagement, but we came of age in a time where there was higher engagement, right? So we remember a time when like, your neighborhood didn't get this, or your snow didn't get picked up, or this happened, or land child murders, etc. Right?
Yeah.
But then it's like, by the time you came of age, hip hop was on MTV. You see what I'm saying? So you came of age in a time where Black culture started to penetrate mainstream culture in a very interesting way. So I think anyone post us has this very interesting expectation of mainstream society versus our communities having to kind of create these constructs on our own. Right? And so once you have generations who are like, no, Hallmark should do a Black History Month card, right? Like you should have Black Panther. When I had Sunman, you know what I'm saying? Like I had the comic book of, the brother from Kemet that was coming to bring light to the rest of the world, right? So like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I do think there's something there. There is something generational about the role of something and people's relationship to it. I just think that the challenge starts to be, well, has the situation changed, or is the way we're looking at the situation different? Because I would argue there's not fewer Black people who need to know about ourselves, or fewer people globally who need to know. It's just, if we're all expecting that mainstream society and mainstream institutions are going to largely be the facilitators of it, then what should be the outcome? Which I think gets to the crux of my kind of thing.
Yeah, and I do think that because and let me know if I go, off the rail a little bit, but I do think from the scale of all of this perspective, right? I know that I regularly, sometimes I flummox people with why does Justice know about that? Like people start talking about something, I'll be, oh, that's the blah, 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 blah. And I'll be like, and they'll be like, what the hell? Where did you read? And I'll be like, I was in the book, man. I don't know. I read it. That's all. I was curious. I want to know why. You know what I mean? And at times I realize that other people, the world exists and then they engage it. They're not necessarily concerned, with the backstory. And so when we are looking at this, and then it's like, yeah, like, corporate America's like, yo, we need to do Black History Month coming up. We got to jump on it. You know what I mean? My own, hypothesis on Black History Month and the way that it has become in our society is a bigger thing to me. And I'm sure, I've read different things that kind of point to sort of the smoke. No, there's no smoking gun conversation, so to speak, moment. But generally, that it was like, well, we need to do something because they still mad, coming in out of the last, after the assassination of Dr. King and other sort of as like the capstone turning moment, and then eventually, the collapse of the Panthers as we understand them at their apex, by 71, 72. It was like, well, we could do. They had this thing called Black History Month. Right. And we could just start pushing it. You know what I mean? Like we'll have a corporate event, we'll have something internally where we talk about, the 3 Black executives that we hired, to look like we give a damn about hiring Black people as corporate America, which Black corporate America still does not hire Black people. Just so everybody remembers that. They don't. Just so I'm saying it again, because for the people in the back. And then and then us seeing that, we're like, oh, they over there acting like they give a damn about it. I don't really know if I want to participate no more. You know what I'm saying? Or I don't know if how should I orient to it, right? And and it could be something that and I know that people do things, right? People still put together events and learnings and these things. I don't know if there's I don't feel there's I feel like more of the tide of the culture is to not really, is to go more, I do Black history every day. Like, I ain't really into the Black history. Black History Month for y'all. Like, I mean, we've all seen the comic. And to a degree it is, but then it's like, actually, bro, the comic is wrong. Because it wasn't for them. It wasn't for anyone external. It was for us. And other people joined. Right, as a way, and then other people say, "Yeah, we should have this other culture's history month," and this women's, and then it is a operational device within our society, sort of like the time that signifies awareness around whatever topic, issue, blah blah, you name it, right? So this is a construct that we understand in our macro society: breast cancer awareness month, to prostate cancer awareness month, to Movember, and it is, all of these are in the same thread of thinking that, we will signify a place on the calendar, and then it is a functional sort of development strategy around any public campaign or cause to designate a place where you go, we want to raise the awareness about this. You know what I'm saying? We want to go into the Coming to America reference, Jackson Heights, we got to have this what's name awareness month to build up the community center. You know what I'm saying? And Miss Lisa from the what's name gonna come here, and the beautiful daughters of our own McDowell, like he's gonna get up on stage. Like these are ideas that we understand, and I think that there's something that happens with this where you want, it feels out of your hands.
Right.
I think, and I think to me that's sort of the scale thing where it's like, oh, this shit is all over. Like it's done gone so many places. I don't know. It seems like too much. I will, maybe there's a film festival and I'll see if I could go catch a movie. Right. Like I'll see if I could jump in somewhere on it, but I am not, mapping out my own engagement, with that information. And, I would like to see or return or be a part of more. So just something. So I'm going to do, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do. I'm talking to by, like I did like a Black History little class for like the kids and that we've been doing organizing with last summer. And I'm going to do something at the end of the month, and we'll just have a conversation about, history. I don't know, I may have a topic. I got to do sort of a little bit of work so I can get there. You know what I mean? Because it is, well, one, I was asked because young people enjoyed it. They had fun talking about history with me, and I like talking about it, so I want to do it again. Right? But and that's a little small. That's my little thing. But there is a collective value if folks are having these things where it's like, we're doing something fun about us, for our own benefit. You know what I'm saying? And other people may or may not watch. I wonder, I don't know what the right pathway is to the impact, I don't know, catching up sort of with the scale of things.
I think here's the interesting thing here. Like, it's both and, right? Like, I think if sometimes you want to go small to go back big again, or you want to have something small that, in the cool Hove restores the feeling after Snoop came and crushed the buildings, right? And, you know what I mean? Like, you want to have something that is very impactful while all the other stuff is going on, then that's fine. I think sometimes we all get into this either or conversation, which again goes back to the hero or villain, person or system, Du Bois or Booker T, L. Malik Shabazz or Martin Luther King. You see what I'm saying? Like, Vernon Jordan and Ron Brown and them versus the Panthers, right? We get into this thing of like, except like the broader vision of all of it does something. Not one of them does everything, right? But all of it does something. So I think it's really finding out where we do it, because I think there's something to be said for the kind of impactful engagement around a neighborhood's history and your family's history, right? Which I think is really important parts of Black history. Because again, part of the challenge of us, where Black folks are doing as everyone else in the country does. We live at a lot of places, right? And we're not all living in Harlem and East Trenton and, Bronzeville and South LA, South Philly, like, U Street. That we're not all doing that anymore, right? So with that comes, how do you so it was easy to talk about those places because it was like, hey, we're going to talk about, these people from this neighborhood or this city as part of Black history. Well, that's a little different now because you got kids that's grown up, and then what relationship do they have to those places? But I think there is something to be said for family history. There's something to be said for a city's history, and you know what I mean, and then or topics history, right? Like if a young person is into science, or young person's into botany, or young person's into military strategy, they frame it for them for that, versus just this like, here's the 8 people you should know about, and then someone else is like, well, here's the 18 people they didn't tell you about because they didn't want you to know about these people. Right? Where like, here's the frameworking, and then here's how a community shares information to complement, and this is important, all the other things. Because what we can do sometimes, and I've said this before about a lot of different stuff, we can make ourselves museums. We can be like, look at what Duke Ellington did. Now, you see it sometimes when you go to D.C. in particular. It's like, look at what U Street was. And it's like, but there's no Black people around. Right? So we're really, this is a museum. And some people might say a mausoleum. And so I think that it's important for us to have that living form of history where it's like, okay, this is what's happening, but Black history is still being made. If something happened in 1990, guess what? That was 30 years ago now.
Yeah, like, no, right? That is not a recent fact.
No, it's not a recent fact. I thought about it. If when we was coming up, if somebody told you something in 85 and they told you about something happened 30 years ago, it was 55. Right? And now, for the same time, our younger babies are young. Like, yeah, okay, if you're 14 and you hear about something that happened in 1990, you were not even a glimmer in anyone's eye in 1990.
They're like, y'all had cell phones then? Like,
yeah, really. That's real Black. That's MC Hammer's real Black history, Jack. So, and I'm being funny but kind of serious in the sense that, we can forget the power of what Hammer meant to the record industry in the same way now that we give so much credit to black folks who broke into, Chuck Berry's and you know what I mean? Like the fact that MC Hammer figured out a way to put on certain pants and dance and turn it into however many millions of dollars and had a Kentucky Fried Chicken deal and a cartoon. Shit, he paved the way for everybody now that feels like that's the norm, right? Not trying to go too far with it, but even dig this, right? When Doom returned recently, right? MF Doom. Everyone talks about he had this opportunity on Cartoon Network, right? Cool. Does that happen without Hammer starting with doing cartoons in the 90s?
Probably not.
Right? With the whole idea of like taking voiceovers and taking these like dark black voiceovers. And again, it gets more niche markets. I'm not trying to draw a direct line, but you know what I mean? Like a lot of stuff we take for granted now on Cartoon Network, even if they're slightly adult cartoons.
Yeah.
It starts because of this idea of just this broader interest, because now you got people who are adults who've been watching cartoons their whole life.
Right. I mean, I think just even to add a layer to that, to think about it. I mean, even Doom as an artist, his life, his creative thread line goes back to that age, right? Like he didn't, I mean, for some people, absolutely. They experience him have MF Doom, and then later somebody told him he used to have Love X, and the whole idea with KMD, blah 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 blah, right? So they may look at it in that. So I know that people know that, but there's a lot of people who probably may not make that thread. They may not, make that relationship between, Gas Face, you know what I'm saying, and the even the other different ways that, our generation as young people, the way we consumed entertainment, right? Like, we are the generation that really kept watching cartoons like way longer than anybody else before. Like, like our parents' generation knew about Mickey Mouse, but I don't think they was really watching Mickey Mouse for themselves.
Right. It wasn't acceptable. Right. It was not acceptable to watch a cartoon past a certain time. It's like It's like video games, right? Like at some point, adults, like adults had been like, okay, so once you get past this age, you should put that down, brother. Where now it's like it's a huge industry, right? Like, shit, I play FIFA. You know what I'm saying? A lot. You know what I mean? It's a little different than shooting people, but it's still a game. But right. I mean, I think to this broader point, there are throughways that are not like in black and white photos. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's important for us all to put into context, because sometimes, again, our framework, and I think the slightly show the best of our people, like our kind of people element of Black History Month, right, was show the best of our people. Yeah,
definitely.
And so we're still doing that, and I think that's fine, but some stuff just makes history, and maybe that story doesn't end like you want it to end, right? Maybe it's a cautionary tale, but it's still a story. So if Hammer loses all of his money and then comes back as a tech investor now, right? I don't know. I think that's actually still a winning story.
I mean, look, that's. I mean, one, I think I think we struggle with this. The reality of speaking to that, most of us, whatever happens to us when we're young in our context, most of us are going to live long enough to have multiple phases of our lives, whether they be good, bad, triumphant, whether they lead to fabulous wealth or just a consistent, peaceful, hopefully healthy life, right? But I get the sense sometimes that, especially I think our generation hasn't. I don't think we like talking about how old we are or something. And what, like, I don't feel like. I mean, I think it's starting to come. I think it's in there in some of the TV shows like Snowfall and Blackish and the other show I can't think of. It's in ATL. It's in some of these different movies. It's there. The pieces of, like, we had a very specific experience. From if you was of our age coming through the 80s and 70s, 80s, 90s. But I think there's still a lot more that could be shared. I think that when you do some study and you like all the intellectual labor, which the benefit of having this many Black academics, although, we've talked about times sort of like how prominent Black academics have become in the last 20 years, and even in many ways where some of the people who would have been political leaders maybe or something else in a different time, that's where they at. There's great value in the analysis that they're doing in some of their work. Not everybody, some people work, I'm like, you keep it to yourself next time, but I appreciate you for working on it. Like there's, when we are doing these other things, when you can maybe have that contextual study of like what's happened with your family or your neighborhood, or your block, where you come from. Right. But then when you go for that other data that somebody else did that labor, you can be like, oh snap, I can tie this into, traditional African food ways and how they've dispersed across the diaspora, you know what I'm saying? And morphed in with the development of the post, Columbian exchange, you know what I'm saying? In terms of, the foods of the indigenous people of these nations engaging with the foods of the indigenous cultures of other nations. And like, you can map all that together if you want to get there. You know what I mean? And start looking to this, like, what's the future, right? What's the future that we want to build to supplant, the reality that we're in. But you still have to like do your part, right? You got to like look at your aspect, you know what I'm saying? And I think that Black History Month can be a place where we do that, right? We're, maybe in a different and more intentional way, and maybe we say, hey, maybe we decide, 100 years later almost, it's 1926. So 2026, we look at, we have the, are we done with Black History Month conference? It's been a century, maybe we want to change the motto. Like maybe the motto is like it's officially Black History Month is done. You know what I'm saying? It's just February now. And then this other month, whatever the new construct is. But it's like, it still is meaningful to me to say, let's have that conversation. Let's talk about how do we see, this may seem trivial. I mean, it is music related again, but I was listening to, listen to music generally, but I listened to Let Me Ride a couple of months ago, and then it came back. And I had my different issues with Dr. Dre as an individual, as I perceived him, and in many ways I still do, but definitely at that time in the '90s, and I ain't want to like it. It's a dope ass song. I ain't saying the messages is all positive or whatever. He ain't have to call them sisters skeezers at the bus stop. They were just trying to get where they had to go. What I'm saying is, I gotta bear with, like, there was a moment, it was a cultural moment based on taking that, putting that music around a music style that come out the 70s, right? And is about sort of the culture of that age and how we experienced it as children, and then reinterpreted it in art. Like there's an analysis there that is dope to think about. And then also you might like the song. You know what I'm saying? Right. Like that is the importance of art. I was listening to, driving back from home last night, an interview with Bisa Butler, does the portraits with the fabric and stuff. I want to say it's Bisa. I think it's Bisa Butler. If I misstated the sister's name, I apologize. I will get it right.
No, I think it was Bisa Butler. Yeah.
And in the part of the interview, she was talking about like, she started doing these portraits and things of family, right, and family friends and community folks that she knew. And then when she wanted to go broader, like realizing that there was still something in like seeing these archival photos of Black people, different ages, different times, and then she adds these other layers of like she's making it. She's not just recreating the look, but she also like may try to use the fabrics of that time, what I'm saying, and the styles of that time to tell, to bring that, like, bring to life those people and how they saw the world and their, but also in their relationship to us now. And it's like, that's ill. That in many ways, and in terms of art creation, is as much sampling as doing that with music or whatever, and picking up some of the energy and the time of a different thing, but also to see and remind you of the past, but also think about what will come of it. What will come next. And I think that if we, I think it's important to maintain the idea, like the future is made, from what you're doing now. But it is impacted by how you understand what got you here. and you got to find some way to balance that nexus and keep that rotation going. And, I think art is always a good vehicle for that, or art as we call it now, where in other ages we may have called it, some other, like, oh, they're doing some type of, what I'm saying, they might have called it something more, what we would frame as religious or spiritual in some sense, right? We would have maybe framed it differently in another age. That's not the way we frame those acts where you're reinterpreting reality or interpreting some piece of reality to share something that you're thinking or feeling or whatever. That you look at this thing I made, or feel this stuff I talked about, or listen to me sing this thing, or eat this, eat this. Nah, listen, you got to eat it. It's delicious. It's going to take you right back to, oh man, I feel like I'm 5 again. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, these are the things that humans do.
The aesthetic. The aesthetic. It takes you back to that, I think whether hip hop and porn has framed stuff like the ecstasy or like R&B songs is like ecstasy. But it's like being ecstatic and being taken to another mental and emotional state, to your point, is very normalized in other societies. And even to the point of like, we easily talk about that when we say the runner's high, right? Or the buzz you get from working out, or the buzz you get from being connected to people and hearing a song, right? Like we normalize it in some senses, but then make it really distant in others. So I appreciate you sharing it like that.
Yeah. So all that said, man, you doing any speeches for Black History Month? You gonna go there and drop some science? Conferences? They ain't invite Majestic to no conferences.
They invite me to no. But listen, I'm not angry. You didn't invite me because I gotta continue to get on Zooms, and I know people be doing the mullet outfit where it's like all business up top and party on the bottom. But I don't get down like that. Like I can't put no shirt and tie on and then have a pair of shorts on, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
you just tuck it in your gym shorts?
No, man, it don't feel right, man. It feels like, what are you doing, man? So, you feel like a Jay-Z back in the day with like a suit jacket on and a big pair of jeans and a pair of sneakers. So, like, so no, but I mean, I think the important part of this for me, and I learned about, I forget the brother's name right now, but he was, the first person in Ohio to go for his law to be accepted in the bar. He went to Oberlin College. His last name was Langston. Forgetting his other, I'll send you. And then he actually went down to be the first Black person in Virginia in the House of Representatives. He was the co-founded the law department at Howard, and then eventually went to become the president of Virginia State University. And Langston University in Oklahoma is named after him, right? So I think the role of Black folks in academics is something that's underplayed, and specifically with HBCUs, like what it really meant to have to create this infrastructure of being able to survive via education in a rapidly changing environment. And again, sometimes we just go, Mary McLeod Bethune, right? As if like Bethune-Cookman was the only place that like somebody created, right? Obviously, with a Black woman, she deserves all respect in the world. But I'm saying, like, there were a lot of people, Black men and women, who were participatory in developing the infrastructure that we now know as HBCUs, as well as creating a space for Black folks to attend predominantly white institutions in a time where that was absolute hell, right? So, I have learned some things, and I think this year is almost like the year you take to think about something, like the year you take off to like think about it, like, oh, let me think about what I'm gonna do next year. This is that month for me. I just want to tell everybody, man, I don't eat it no more, but y'all missed out on the McDonald's coupons, man. The 2-for-1s, man. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. The tallow fries and the chicken sandwiches and the filet fish sandwiches, man. I want to let y'all know. I know Black History Month ain't, y'all don't want it to, be as like callow, but you missed out on that callow. You missed out on that callow element as well as the Budweiser Kings and Queens of Africa.
This is supposed to change. That's my, as far as I'm concerned. Hannibal is that dude. He's got the tusks, he got a big ass sword and shit. Yeah, the beard and shit, you know what I'm saying? That's how he rolled. That's what Hannibal looked like to me. I don't know nothing about no other images of Hannibal. It was that brother going over the Alps. You know what I'm saying? He was black. You know what I'm saying?
He was black and black too.
It wasn't no mistaking that he was a man of African descent. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't no like, well, he might be, you start having, because these days people will have these conversations and they get all, you know what I mean? I bet, look, man, if you was on the continent of Africa, you black, you African. That's how this works. That's where you was born. That's where you from, right? You know what I'm saying? I was born on the banks of the Delaware River. Like, I don't get to be like, well, I'm actually from the land of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, no, that's where I was. That's how when I started out, that's where I came out at. You know what I'm saying? Like, I might have did some other things, but damn, like, let's not make this too deep. You know what I'm saying? People like, I ain't no American. I'm a such. Well, you was born in America, dog. You American as a motherfucker and shit. I ain't trying to disparage you or nothing. Like, call me that, man. I'm gonna take you revolution. I'm like, all right. Cool. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's they'll never know what it was like. I mean, I imagine they must. I don't know what goes on in them places in that store these days. They might have something I would never know because I don't be over there. But they could be hiding all of the riches and freedom in the playground at the McDonald's, and I'll never get it because I ain't in there. And I'm like, damn, we could have been free. They put it in the McDonald's. Damn, man.
Put it in McDonald's. They put it in the library in McDonald's so you wouldn't go get it. They put it in the library for other people. They put it in the library that they black people don't read, which is a damn lie. And for us, they put it in the McDonald's bathroom because you won't get there.
Yeah, I ain't going in there. That's how they get it.
Oh, man.
They cold piece. So yeah, man. Well, guys, I think we at the right spot. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for adding on with me that day.
As always, man. Thank you, my brother.
All right. So with that, we'll say peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Thank you to my good brother, Majestic, for joining me again. Thank you to you for listening. Ask Your Oldhead is a creative project created by me, myself, produced, at least in this part, with my good brother, Majestic. But otherwise, it's a one-man creative show. Hopefully our conversation brought something of use and value to you. You can support the podcast by sharing, with a friend, family, somebody you care about. You can also support the podcast by grabbing a sweatshirt from the Etsy shop or, becoming a patron on Patreon and put in a regular contribution, to allow us to, or me and us and we to work to keep bringing this, content, so to speak, to the web. As we go through the month of Black History Month, and every month, please, always take the best part for yourself. Make time for the ones that you love. Study hard, and study earnestly. Other than that, I think we can go ahead and let it go. So, thank you for listening once again, and peace.